not sustainable. What we as the HBS office Abuja have done for the Nigeria edition is to supplement the international version of the Plastic Atlas with articles that provide some insight into the particular challenges facing Nigeria as a country. Nigeria is already one of the largest importers and consumers of plastic on the continent. And with plastic production set to increase, the country urgently needs to invest into its waste management capabilities, but also into its regulatory environment to tackle the mounting effects of plastic pollution on people and the environment. While Nigeria's efforts to hold companies in the beverage industry accountable for their contribution to the plastic crisis are laudable, they need much wider and efficient implementation in order to make a real difference. In the end, however, and this is probably the most important message of the Plastic Atlas, solutions to the plastic crisis in Nigeria and elsewhere need to focus more on preventing more plastic from entering the market and on implementing and supporting zero waste strategies in communities and cities, alternative delivery systems, and finding alternative reusable products. For that to be achieved, we believe citizens need to demand action and real solutions from their policymakers to keep our ecosystem and bodies free from plastic and their toxic additives. In other words, the solutions not only lie with us as consumers, by the choices we make, for example, by not taking the plastic bag or by recycling, but the solutions, maybe more importantly, also lie with us as active citizens who can make demands to stop the problem at the source and ensure that producers are held accountable for the pollution they are causing. So much, a little bit of background on the publication of the Plastic Atlas itself. What we're here to do for today is to unpack and dig a little bit deeper into the specific plastic waste challenges facing Nigeria. To do this, we have two of the contributors to the Nigeria edition of the Plastic Atlas with us here today. This includes Joshua Babayemi, who is a senior lecturer in the Department of Chemical Science at Anchor University in Lagos. Joshua, who has authored the piece on consumption and trends in Nigeria that you will find on page 16 of the Atlas, will give us a bit of an overview on exactly that. Kofo Adeleke, who is a Lagos-based development consultant with a long and rich history in environmental activism, will then be talking about the policy environment on plastic waste management, what the state of affairs is, and what needs to be done to address the existing gaps. Last but not least, we are glad to also welcome Professor Aliyu Jauro. He is the Director General of the National Environmental Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency, NESRIA. He will be giving us some insights into what NESRIA has and will be doing to address the issue of plastic waste in Nigeria, with a particular focus on the extended producer responsibility policy. He will also be supported by some of his team members on the call. Each of the speakers will be given about 10 minutes for their inputs, after which we will go into a discussion where all of you have the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. Before we start, I also would like to thank and acknowledge all the authors who have contributed to the Nigeria edition of the Atlas, and most of whom are present on the call here today. This includes, of course, Kofo Adeleke, Joshua Babayemi, but also Chigozie Chikere, Ifena Ilechukwu, and Agareze Onagise. I also would like to thank and acknowledge my colleague Chibu Ebi, who has worked very hard to help put this publication together and prepare for today's event. He's also the host in the background for today, and yeah, I thank him very much. Should you not have done so already, please visit our webpage at www.ng.boell.org to download a copy of the Plastic Atlas. Chibu will also be sharing an attendance list in the chat. Please fill in the information if you would like to remain in touch with us. With that, I would already like to hand over to the first presenter, which is Joshua. So Joshua, please go ahead and give us an overview of what the state of plastic consumption and production is in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
All protocols duly observed. Once again, Mr. Ebi, Mr. Joshin, Mrs. Kofo, and the Director General, Nigeria. So nice attending such historic occasion like this. And the time to find a way around reducing the amount of plastics in Nigeria, while looking for way arounds to reduce the amount of plastics in Nigeria. First of all, we need to understand the dimensions of the problem on ground already. So I'll be speaking on plastic consumption trend and its impact on plastic waste in Nigeria. Already, large volumes of plastics have been produced worldwide, in Africa, and in Nigeria. And the production is increasing. The use as well is increasing. Not only that, especially for African countries, including Nigeria, large volumes of plastics have been imported and used by various sectors. And recent studies have shown that rivers are a major source of marine litter, and Nigeria ranks 6th in the global plastic marine litter release. Now, the look at the charts, it gives us the trend of the import of plastics in Nigeria between the year 1996 and the year 2017. And then if things do not change, there is no change in policy, no change in consumers' attitude, then that is with business as usual, then there is a projection to the year 2030. In 1996, the import was 554,513 tons. And by the year 2010, this increased to approximately 2.93 million tons. Between that year, 1996 and year 2017, altogether, a total of 19.87 million tons of primary plastics and the plastics as products were imported into Nigeria. And this constitutes about 16.9% of the total consumption in Africa. And then with business as usual, if there is no change in consumers' attitude, if we don't have a change in policy to address the challenges of plastics in Nigeria, by the year 2030, we'll be having about 41.57 million tons of plastics in Nigerian environments. And this is just primary plastics and plastics as products, not looking at the plastic components of other products like motor vehicles, electronic equipment, and then toys. If we are to look at this for plastics imported as in primary form and as products, that was about 17,620,000 tons. That is as at the year 2014. And the plastic components of refrigerators constitute about 145,920 tons. Then the plastic components of air conditioning equipment constitute about 40,350 tons. Plastic components of laundry washing machines constitute about 27,301 tons. Then the plastic components of motor vehicles, in fact, that takes a larger share. It comes to about, that's 2,932,128 tons. For categories 3 and 4 of European Union electronic equipment, that is the computers and the television sets, the plastic component comes to about 2,400,000 tons. That is between the year 1996 and 2014. And altogether, we have in Nigeria 23,400,000 tons of plastics in our environment. Now, looking at the impact, looking at this large volume, definitely it has impact on waste generation in Nigeria. So the waste plastic constitutes about 13% of municipal solid waste, and the generation of about 28 kilograms per capita per year. And then looking at a mega city like Lagos, the generation rate has increased about 45 kilograms per capita per year. Then with about 0.85 million tons of waste plastics mismanaged every year, then we have between 0.13 and 0.34 million tons finding their way into water bodies in Nigeria. Then in the last 10 years, the total amount of mismanaged waste plastics in Nigeria is estimated to about 8.5 million tons. Now, looking at the impact on our environment, we can see the scene. What I did here was just to take a particular institution. I've started monitoring the plastic waste generation since the year 2017. So I tried to bring these extracts from that study. So you can see on the dump site, all kinds of plastics dumped at that dump site. And then I observe the activities of scavengers on that dump site. They recovered the one they thought is recyclable. The other ones, they set on fire, they burnt. At another part of that dump site, you can see all kinds of single-use plastics, the wraps, and all kinds of plastics dumped at that particular site. And here they only picked the PET bottles. All the other ones, they set on fire. And before setting on fire, if there is wind or storm, they blow them around and then route them into any nearby river or streams. Then this is a wider picture of that dump site studied. You can see a man there, that's the scavenger at the dump site there, recovering the recyclable plastics, in particular the PET bottles, while the other ones were burnt. These were the PET bottles of all kinds for bottled water, drinks that were recovered from that dump site. Then I tried to look closely again to look at other categories of plastics that we had on that dump site. You can see the styrofoam, that is the extruded type, the one they use for packaging of food, the one in blue color here, the one pink color. Then you have other single-use plastic bags, maybe for packaging of something like the candies, the biscuits, the sweets, and all the rest. All those ones, they were set on fire, and some of them were blown around in the bush everywhere on the road by the storm or by the wind. Then at another time, visiting that dump site again, just saw that all other categories of plastic, the single use, the styrofoams, they were just packed together and then they were set ablaze on the fire there. So open burning is a common solid waste management options in Nigeria, and in particular for single-use plastics. And that in one way or the other constitutes environmental nuisance or releasing of toxic substances into the environment. Since there is no effective solid waste sorting systems, so mixed waste, including plastics, they end in dump sites where they are set on fire. These open burning methods result in the release of hazardous substances into the environment. As a result, then the plasticizers in the plastics, then they were released into the environment. In conclusion, the huge amount of plastic polymers in Nigeria has implications for environmental pollution, waste management, and resource recovery potential. Therefore, potential mitigating strategies may include plastic waste reuse, recycling, waste conversion to energy, and appropriate policy frameworks for plastic control and restriction. Also, policy should address the waste hierarchy with an emphasis on single-use plastics. We have observed that single-use plastics, they are the most risk, the risk that constitute most risks of all categories of plastics in Nigeria environment. Therefore, policies should address the waste hierarchy with an emphasis on single-use plastics, use reduction, and waste recycling and recovery. Now, for the policy to go in the right direction and to address the right challenges, we need to first take two steps. Number one is to carry out detailed inventory of plastics in Nigeria. So the inventory of plastic imports, use, and waste flows is a prerequisite for the development of national strategies and related national action plans for the environmentally sound management of plastic waste. It is therefore suggested or highly recommended for the government of Nigeria as a good starting point. And another recommendation is, in addition, establishing life cycle analysis of plastics in Nigeria will be a great help in taking decisions and making of appropriate policy. We know plastics have been with us for years. To just bring out a policy stop, we may end up generating other more complex problems. But we need to do some preliminary studies, inventory to identify who are the stakeholders, the networks in handling of plastics in Nigeria, what volumes do we have at different life cycle stages. This will enable policymakers to take decision in the right direction. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joshua, very much for this presentation that kind of brought us up to speed as regards to the big picture. I think in particular, the last point is very important that you make here. As the saying goes, you cannot manage what you can't measure. So I think there's really a great need to get hold of more and better data. I think it's also one of the experiences we had while putting together the plastic atlas. It's enormously difficult to find the right data, and I think more should be done to create that kind of data in order to better know where exactly Nigeria stands. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much. Without further ado, we go straight to Kofo.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Kofo.
Good day, everyone.
If you could just switch off your camera and your microphone, Joshua, and stop sharing your screen. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Trying to share my screen.
Should I help you from here?
Just one moment.
Okay.
Where it is. want to unmute you. And share video. Oh, hello. Can you see
Yes,
the screen?
yes, we can see your screen. Go ahead.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give a short presentation on plastic pollution, policy options to fill the gap. There's been a huge increase in waste in Nigeria, and many reasons for it: population growth, increased urbanization, changing lifestyles and consumption patterns, busy urban life, reliance on time-saving options, and throwaway plastic items have somehow become a symbol of modern life. And drinking water from plastic bags is now evidence of the inability to deliver safe pipe-borne water to citizens. I mean, there's a whole generation that have grown up who have never experienced getting drinking water from taps. And that's not just in rural areas, this is in urban areas. And so there's been a proliferation of pure water sachet production businesses. And developing countries like Nigeria are just now presented with a very serious waste management challenge. Now, this picture, I took this picture. I'm sorry, I apologize that it's not very, very sharp, but it's a drainage system in Ikoyi, and almost 100% of the material in there was made up of water bottles, sachets, styrofoam, and food containers. There's been some federal legislation that relates to plastic waste, and one of the first pieces of legislation which dealt with environmental degradation is the Harmful Waste Decree of 1988, which was very, very important. And also there's a story behind it, which I think people should really sort of learn about. It's the toxic waste dumping in Cocoa Village, but it's a very important and interesting story which actually came before this important decree in 1988. Following on from that, we had the Federal Environmental Protection Agency Act. Okay, I think I've gone back. Okay. The Federal Environmental Protection Act in 1992, and there were various other subsidiary regulations. In 1999, FEPA and other departments were merged together to form the Federal Ministry of Environment, but this happened without an appropriate enabling law and enforcement issues. So by 2007, NESRA, which is the National Environmental and Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, was established because FEPA wasn't able to enforce its own regulations, and NESRA addressed the need for an enforcement agency. In 2018, there was a bill put forward to ban plastic bags, the use, import, manufacture of all plastic bags in order to address the harmful impacts. But this bill was never turned into actual legislation. Now we have a national policy on solid waste management. It came out in 2018, but it's been updated in this year, 2020. I have had a look at it. It's 90 pages, so I haven't looked at it in full detail. But I just want to say that there are sort of three things which really came out. There's a very, very big role here for NESRA to play in terms of enforcement, implementation, and also the regulations and the standards. And another thing is that the emphasis in this particular policy is very, very heavy on recycling. Also, there was a lot in it about separation at source. This is very important because I think for almost 20 years, people have been talking about trying to separate waste at source. I mean, I know that Loma in Lagos did try many years ago to get people to separate waste at source, but it was never really fully implemented or fully successful. So it will be very interesting to see how this national policy is going to handle that aspect. Nigeria has been very, very slow to beat plastic pollution. I mean, there are many other African countries that have come up much earlier with anti-plastic legislation to reduce the use of single-use plastics. I put Bangladesh here. Bangladesh is not an African country, but it has very similar issues. I mean, they came out with legislation in 2002, and you can see South Africa in 2003. Now, in 2017, Kenya came out with some very, very heavy sort of legislation. I mean, it was, you know, they came out and imposed very, very big fines for anybody using plastic bags, and even, you know, sort of prison sentences. And what was also so special about the legislation that Kenya came out with in 2017 is that it got international attention. This was like the first time that an African country had actually got international attention about tackling plastic waste. And many other countries around the world actually felt that they were actually doing what many countries, developed countries, should be doing. Interestingly, in 2018, Taraba State came out to ban plastic bags, but it would be very interesting to find out how far they have actually gone. Now, weak waste management systems in African and Asian countries, 100% collection rate is very, very difficult to achieve because of financial and operational constraints. And so in many cases, the best option is to implement total bans on the most problematic single-use plastics, and then look for projects to replace them. And that is why a lot of African countries, that's why Africa has the most countries that have gone for the total bans. I mean, since 2003, the Federal Ministry of Environment has been announcing plans and timelines to phase out the use of plastic polythene bags, but there haven't been any results or really concrete actions on this. But there has been a lot of international pressure. UNEP launched the Clean Seas campaign in 2017, and Nigeria signed up in 2018. Nigeria is among the top 10 countries producing the largest amounts of mismanaged plastic waste. Going onto NESRA, NESRA in 2014 started what was called the Extended Producer Responsibility Program. This is a policy that aims to cover the total life cycle of products. It's more than a cradle to grave approach, because it aims to implement sort of like a circular economy. A circular economy is an economic system that aims to eliminate waste, and it promotes the continual use of resources, and it puts the responsibility shifts from the government to the producers in the private sector, and it provides a framework of action for collaborative partnerships between government, business, and other stakeholders towards achieving zero waste. Now, there are some issues with it. You will find that the standards and capabilities of manufacturers vary greatly to the degree in which they can actually implement these EPR guidelines, which they can apply them, because there are some manufacturers that operate internationally, and they have they have got that capacity to do this kind of thing. But there are others who are sort of way not as advanced as those manufacturers. And so there's need for more information and communication in order to understand how the policy works. Clearer identification of stakeholder roles and responsibilities, and also a clearer understanding of the economic costs and incentives, and of course, adequate funds for monitoring and enforcement of the program. Right, impacts of policies to reduce plastic. A lot of, there could be some threats to sort of, seen to the businesses that are involved in the import and manufacture of such products. I mean, things like, job losses and then the negative impact on the economy. And of course, a ban on single-use plastic packaging could have sort of other potential risks. I mean, for example, when it comes to water security, this is a situation where safe water supplies are lacking. The only way to get the water is actually by using a plastic packaging. And so any decision to impose a ban on single-use plastic bags must be done in a gradual, phased approach, and it must be, with informed evidence, and to ensure, the potential unintended consequences are clearly identified and well managed. Now, there are lots of policy options. I mean, for example, public-private partnerships can be built at all different levels of government, and they can support projects that recycle single-use items, and also establishing national standards for recycled polyethylene terephthalate, which is known as PET, because that can increase the quality of recycled plastics and reduce the overall amount of plastic waste that goes into the ecosystems. And of course, these standards have to be set at the federal level. Levies is also an alternative to a ban on single-use plastics, because the revenues generated from the levies can be used to support recycling projects and create jobs. And economic incentives, tax rebates to encourage a change in the business models within the plastic industry. The most important thing is to plan very well ahead, and this means you have to have strong public education and social awareness campaigns about the impacts and the risks of plastic consumption, and also information about the solutions and alternatives. I mean, that's really key when you sort of put forward plastic waste strategies. And also a wide range of stakeholders have to be involved. Producers, retailers, consumers, collectors, recyclers, all tiers of government, NGOs, media, to ensure that there's a broad acceptance of the policy. And industries have to be given time to produce affordable alternatives to these plastics. Coordinated actions between government and industry. As I've said, government can reduce taxes and import duties if the policy is to encourage alternatives to plastics and to make it easier for industry to have access to the materials to produce these alternatives. But if the policy is to encourage recycling, then land has to be made available for these activities. And this is where land use comes in, and physical planning, because if you want people to have collection centres, then you need land for that. If you want to do recycling, you need to have land for that. And in many urban areas, land is often difficult to find for these things. And also the government can introduce policies to establish industrial parks and encourage research and development. Now, I'll go back to talk about vested interests. I mean, there are invested interests in the importation and manufacture of single-use plastics, and they may seek to influence policymakers and resist change because of the fears about the economic impact of the ban. And this is why all participants in the plastic industry must be given support and enough time to adapt. And evidence-based studies can also help to counter opposition to policies to reduce the use of single-use plastics by people in the plastic industry, because evidence-based studies helps in decision-making, and it's actually based on actual practice. Barriers to policies and regulations to reduce plastic waste. Lack of policy enforcement, inadequate stakeholder engagement and public awareness campaigns, lack of cost-effective alternatives and recycling facilities. Financial constraints mean that you don't have the sort of necessary breadth and depth of public awareness campaigns. And also, of course, weak governance and political will are factors that make it difficult to implement and enforce these policies. We need to have a very clear roadmap. There is no single policy or regulation alone that can reduce the consumption of plastic waste. You need a combination of approaches based on the realities of what is appropriate for the local needs and socioeconomic conditions, and what can realistically be achieved. Properly planned partnerships with key stakeholders, adapted as necessary, with the public fully updated on progress and evaluation. So I'm going to just finish here. And I'm going to sort of bring out a quote from the Plastic Atlas, which actually says, "We cannot recycle our way out of the plastic crisis." Because if you have a policy which is really heavily based on recycling alone, it cannot solve the increased volume of plastic waste. The volume of plastic waste produced outstrips the capacity to efficiently manage the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kofo. That was lovely for laying out the broader policy framework for us, the gaps and issues there, and also the things that need to be held in consideration as we seek for solutions. And as you say, there's obviously, as always, no single silver bullet to find appropriate solutions, but we need to do various things at various levels in order to get it right. So now was actually the time for Nesria to make their contribution. I just saw now that they dropped off the call completely. So I'm not sure how to proceed from here now. That's a bit unfortunate, but maybe let me follow up with a question, and in the meantime, Kofo. So you ended your presentation by saying, okay, or quoting the Plastic Atlas, that we can't recycle our way out of the plastic crisis. At the same time, the Plastic Atlas, or contribution in the Plastic Atlas, also argues that we do have too many regulations at the wrong end. So many of the regulations are exactly focused on recycling, on the disposal side of things. So what do you think could be done in the Nigerian context to actually prevent more plastic from entering the market? And what do you see there as the major challenge to achieve this?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I first of all, as I sort of mentioned in my presentation, other African countries have come up with legislation much earlier on to actually ban certain types of single-use plastics. And I actually think that that is the way forward. And it does actually surprise me that, when we've been looking at some of the policies that have been coming out, that doesn't seem to have been addressed. And I just really think that unless we actually look at that and look at what other countries who actually have much stronger waste management systems have actually come out to limit the use of certain types of single-use plastics. So I just worry how Nigeria thinks that it can actually carry on as things are without taking these measures.
Right, thank you. Thanks for that. The colleagues from Nesria, are they ready to go? I see they're back online. Madam. Yes, here, Prof. Joro. Can you hear and see me? Prof, are you with us? I think you need to unmute, or I can't hear you at the moment. Hello, Prof? We don't seem to hear you. You could try fix your... Okay.
I think they're having audio problems. Maybe when they
All right.
out, you can.
Okay, then let's just carry on. Maybe a question to you, Joshua, also regarding what Kofo has touched on, and I know you also touched on that in your own article that's in the Plastic Atlas, the kind of lessons Nigeria could learn from African peers, and you touching there on the example of Rwanda. So what do you think Rwanda, for example, is getting right that Nigeria could learn from?
For your Rwanda case study, one would think, just like Mrs. Kofo said, the general idea or mindset is if you ban single-use plastics, truly there'll be some economic, so-called negative economic impacts. But if a country could take that bold step, in fact, we try to look at their GDP. We even saw that despite the ban of the single-use plastics, their GDP did not decrease, but rather the GDP increased. So all we need to do, just like Mrs. Kovo said, it may not just be once at a go that there is just a policy single-use plastic stopped today. It could be one, we get the attention of all stakeholders. They are aware that such a policy is on board or is coming forth. They'll be getting ready, getting prepared. Then we can look at different aspects of single-use plastics. Then we take it in phases. For this category, be the first phase. For these other categories in the phase, then we give a timeline, whether within a year or 2 years. By and by, different manufacturers and producers, they will be getting ready, looking for alternatives or modifying their products, or even possible, the plastics may be modified maybe to biodegradable one. They may even sponsor some research along that line just to favor their production. So from Rwanda example or case study, that it is possible to ban, all they did was to have a policy or a law banning single-use plastics, and then one way or the other, there'll be some readjustment, and the economy kicked up again, and things were on. So Nigeria can learn here. There is no how, one way or the other, that some things will not be affected. That is the truth. But everybody should be prepared for that. There is a greater problem we want to solve, and that is saving our environment and saving our lives. And by and by, one way or the other, some businesses will definitely, whether in phases or at a goal, will be affected. But everybody needs to be aware. Businesses, enterprises, industry need to be aware and be getting ready for such a policy to come on board.
Thank you, Joshua. Yes, I totally agree. There's always a trade-off, and one needs to weigh those against the overall objective one wants to achieve. The colleagues from Nesria, are they ready? Prof. Jauru, are you ready to go? You could switch on your camera and microphone. Hello? Are the colleagues from Nesria ready to go? Or there's still technical issues, it seems. Well, if that's the case, then I would suggest that we actually taking some questions from the audience, the first round, which we then may interrupt as Nesria is ready to give their presentation. So I will take a round of first 3 questions. If you would like to raise a question, please raise your hands using that function in Zoom. Please introduce yourself. Please be brief and to the point, and let us know who your question is addressed at. That would be very helpful. So I go through from the top. Mr. E. Peters or Mrs. E. Peters. Jibu, if you could unmute Mr. or Mrs. E. Peters to allow him or her to ask a question.
If it has, you need to unmute yourself if you can hear us.
Otherwise, then move on to Abiola Babatunde.
Yeah, I.
Good morning. Please go ahead.
Morning. My name is Babatunde Abiola. I'm from University of Cape Town, and I'm a behavioral and an environmental economist. So, and my PhD thesis specifically focused on the effectiveness of nudges in addressing plastic bag pollution in Africa, though some of my papers are on Africa as a whole. And I followed the South African plastic bag levy and other development and all those things that are happening. Yeah, we've engaged in a lot of experiment, and I've consulted for CSIR and Unilever. So, but what I want to say here is that there's a framework that we are trying to introduce to Africa as effectiveness of nudges, like looking at the plastic bag levy and as a kind of way, different ways of nudging. So I'm totally like, I'm really not fully in support of ban, because I'm Nigerian and I understand the Nigerian economy to a certain extent. And I know that banning plastic in a country that has a very porous border will not really send to work. So that's my opinion, because we can see what happened in Kenya, where there's a kind of smugglers who struggle from Tanzania and all those things. So Nigeria doesn't, we are struggling to manage our border. So when we look at banning, and plastic bag is part of, there's a link, it's not. So my question is like, can that be a kind of forum where we can try and present different kind of stages of nudges where that can be introduced in order to solve the problem of plastic crisis in Nigeria? Like, we look at behavioral economics, we know that Nigerian behavior to plastic and consumers is somehow different. So, and that is my question.
Okay, thank you. That's well noted. Then I will move on. Macmillan, please, if you could unmute yourself and bring your question.
Macmillan, please unmute yourself so that we can hear you. I don't think he's talking.
Okay, then Emmanuel Oladipo. Please unmute yourself.
Good morning.
Good morning. Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay. Good morning. Well done again. I missed the first one you did, but it's good to be with you now. It's not easy trying to penetrate a very difficult landscape. And the work on plastic in a country like Nigeria is a very difficult area. But I'm happy that you are not giving up. We just have to continue to talk about it and look at the way by which we can all agree that there's always a solution to a problem. And I think that's the key bottom line. It's unfortunate that next year is not able to come online, but at the same time, I want to bring out a number of issues to the presenters. Have you all read the new waste policy that was approved about 4 weeks ago? The waste management policy of the country that was approved by the Federal Executive Council about 4 weeks ago. It's basically on solid waste. But the key thing about it is that I was expecting that a particular section would have been devoted to plastics and so on. But I didn't find it so seriously. They were just based on principles and all that. And that's where nature is very important. This polluters pay concept and everything was there. But I think the way now will be to use this forum to create a platform between government, civil society, and the private sector to discuss these issues very well and see how we can translate this policy into a very workable implementation plan in which the necessity for law, the necessity for enforcement will be clearly stated. As I made in my side comments, the problem with Nigeria is not an issue of policy. We are very good at writing policies. I've written so many for this country on environment, on climate change. But each time we write these policies, they end up being on bookshelf, and they hardly get any follow-up critically in terms of implementation and enforcement. So if this waste management policy now, which I think it was written in 2018, but approved this year, can quickly be used as your major entry point in advocating, in sensitization, to let us see the opportunities in that policy and end up with a sort of implementation action plan that will start like something like this. Say that it's a law, first law, no more plastics in Nigeria by 2030. Let's say something like that. Then let's say, how do we go?
Could you just please wrap up?
That has to be a gradual process.
Questions that you have, so that we can move on. I understand a need to share, which is great, but let's keep contributions short. And if there's a question,
so that's my own thing, that let's look at the way by which we can keep on the pressure on getting this policy translated into something practical that can be very meaningful, that has good deadline as to how we can do it. If we do that, I think we can be okay. Then in the process, you now have all kinds of cushioning effects, subsidies and all the rest that can be used to encourage the private sector and others to move from plastic to other things that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Before I move on, is Nesria now ready to deliver their presentation? Prof. Chauro, are you online? Can you unmute yourself and go ahead, or is there still issues? Otherwise, I would continue with comments and questions.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, but
Yeah,
we can't
go ahead.
see
That's
you,
the
huh?
problem.
Okay.
He was among the attendees. It's like he has a profile with the attendees. So
I see.
Maybe the panelist.
Then if you don't have a presentation to share, then just please go ahead with your verbal delivery of the presentation.
Okay, Mr. Joshen, the convener of this panel, my fellow speakers, all participants, good morning. Sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint to share with you. So I'm the Director General of Nesria. I'm going to talk on the Extended Producer Responsibility Program of the agency. So first of all,
Oops, I'm so sorry. He's back. Sorry, Prof, are you here?
Its application under section. Hello. Can
Yes,
you
please
hear
go.
me? Okay, should I
Please
start
go
my
ahead,
video?
Prof. We can hear you.
Yes, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols duly observed. So I'm going to speak on the extended producer responsibility of the National Environmental Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency of Nigeria. So first of all, let me talk on the government effort in combating plastic waste in Nigeria. So first of all, in exercising its obligation under Section 20 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which provides that the state shall protect and improve the environment and safeguard water, air, and land, forest, and wildlife of Nigeria. So the Nigerian government has formulated its first national policy on environment in 1991, with subsequent revision, with the most recent in 2016. So the national policy on environment provided a holistic framework to guide the management of the natural and environmental resources of the country. The policy birthed the Federal Ministry of Environment in 1999 and the National Environmental Standard and Regulation Enforcement Agency, that is NESRA, in 2007. So in 2018, the Federal Ministry of Environment developed the National Policy on Plastic Life Cycle Management, which drives its strength from existing policies. The essence of the policy is to move towards resources maximization, efficiency, and production. So in the same year, national policy on waste management was also developed, but it was passed recently in 2020, that is 4 weeks ago, as mentioned by Professor Oladipo. So the national policy on plastic management drew its strength from the several international treaties and multilateral agreements, such as the Basel Convention, the Stockholm Convention, and the Strategic Approach to International Chemical Management, that is SICAM, and also the Climate Change Convention, among others. Nigeria has committed to in governing environmental issues, and most recently the Sustainable Development Goals, that is SDGs, especially goals 3, 6, 9, 11, 12, 14, and 17 of the SDGs will be effectively addressed by the national policy on plastic life cycle management. So the policy lays the foundations for a circular economy of plastics so that its design and production incorporate the 5 R's, that is reduce, reuse, repair, recover, and recycle. It is envisaged that this will deliver greater added value to Nigeria and boost innovation towards curbing plastic pollution and its adverse effect on the environment and health. Realizing that a robust regulatory framework and effective enforcement of environmental management tools are critical means of driving sustainable growth, the federal government has gazetted environmental regulations for brown sectors of the environment, with provision for extended producer responsibility program. So the brown environment goes to do with the various industries that are involved in production processes. So we have some that deals directly with the plastic industries, and others also that deals with other sectors that involve one production process or another. So the extended producer responsibility, the operationalization of the EPR is embedded in most of these regulations for the brown environment. And the operationalization of the EPR started in 2009, but the regulated community were not forthcoming in implementing the EPR as contained in the regulation. In view of that, the National Assembly convened a stakeholders meeting in order to address the issue. So on 23rd June 2014, businesses and industries were invited to discuss the issue of EPR by the sector players. So at the end of the meeting, a communique was issued by the National Assembly urging all stakeholders to come forward and key into the EPR program. And a date was set, that was 30th September 2014 for the implementation of operationalization of the EPR program, while Nesria was charged to develop a comprehensive EPR guidelines. So some businesses submitted their proposals, but it did not meet up with the environmental best practices. So most of these proposals were turned down. So action we have taken so far, Nesria has developed the EPR operational guidelines. So that was done and published in 2014. The producer responsibility organization model, that is the PRO model, was adopted to drive the EPR program in line with international best practices, as done in most other countries of the world. So the PRO is a third-party organization formed by producers to enable them collectively manage their end-of-life products on their behalf, and also implement the mandatory take-back scheme in that regard. So the EPR implementation model adopted by Nigeria is the industry-led approach. Essentially, the operational guidelines delineates roles and responsibilities for key sector players, that is the producers, collectors, recyclers, and the PRO themselves, together with the government. So I want to draw the attention of the previous panelists, Mrs. Kofu Adeleke, who mentioned that the roles were not clear. So if you check the operational guidelines, the roles of the various players are spelled out there. So presentation at National Council. So the National Council comprises all the commissioners of the relevant ministries from the 36 states of the Federation, and the FCT headed by the relevant minister at the federal level. So in this regard, to do with environment, the head of that National Council is the Honorable Minister of Environment. So the EPR implementation guidelines and the program was presented at the 10th National Council of Environment, requesting the Council to support the broad-based participation of all stakeholders, including the 3 tiers of government, community, industry, and business, as well as support intense public awareness campaigns on the implementation of EPR. This memo was adopted and approved. An update on the EPR implementation has always been submitted at the subsequent National Council on Environment meetings. So the same memo was submitted to the National Council of Communication Technology, and it was also approved. So presently, registration is ongoing for the producer responsibility organizations, because it's the requirement of the operational guidelines. So some producers in the food and beverages sector have organized themselves and registered their PRO, which is called the Food and Beverages Recycling Alliance. So they are registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission with the facilitation of Nesria. So it is called FIBRA. So this FIBRA is key when it comes to plastic waste management, because most of the waste are generated by the food and beverages industries. So specific efforts in the food and beverages sectors made so far. The sector has made a little progress with the appointment of executive secretary who manages their affairs and also sends quarterly reports as required in the EPR guidelines. So the key innovation application of recovered plastics, what we are targeting to use the plastics for, one, they can be used for road construction, and they can be used as a fuel in cement industries for firing kilns. Already, some of these cement industries have taken in some of these plastics. They have used it to fire their kilns, and the use of this plastic waste in the production of interlocking tiles and bricks. The plastic waste can be used in arts and craft industries, and they can also be used in the production of bed covers, and they can be used in production of granules for the production of sachet and packaged water, and they can be used in the production of face shields frames from caps of the PET bottles. And the plastic waste can be pyrolyzed to produce some liquid fuel. So the future plan for plastic waste control as proposed by the agency include aggressive sensitization campaign to states and facilities producing plastic products to key into the EPR. So after aggressive sensitization, we follow up by enforcement. Then there will be collaboration with sector PRO to set up pilot projects in the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. Number 3, we are going to collaborate with customs for the control of importation of plastic waste. Number 4, there will be development of plastic waste inventory to ensure that we take care of and take the record of all the plastic coming into the country and the amount of waste generated. Number 5, we are going to have compliance monitoring and enforcement to facilities in the sector. And number 6, we intend to follow up and make membership of PRO, that is FIBRA in this case, a prerequisite for relevant environmental certifications. So these are some of the future plans we have, and we look forward to other plans in order to ensure that we take care of this plastic waste in order to keep Nigeria healthier and safe from most of these environmental hazards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for this very insightful presentation and giving us some insight also on the steps forward as you just lined them out. What I'd be curious to know in direct response to the presentation is, what is the kind of time frame that you set yourself in order to implement those steps around sensitization, control of importation, development of a plastic inventory? Is there specific timelines already agreed, or is that yet to be determined?
Yes, we are already on sensitization. So all these are ongoing. Most of the timelines, we are already in the timeline.
Okay.
So we are already sensitizing, and after sensitization, the next thing is enforcement. So we are on it.
Right, okay, great. And one other question, just because it also popped up in the chat and Professor Oladipo touched on it. There seems to be some interest in the solid waste management policy, but there's also a plastic waste management policy, as much as I understand it, which is in the making for quite some time, which also, if you look at the draft, it's quite ambitious, comprehensive. It touches on the EPR, it touches on single-use plastic ban, and various issues at various levels. If you could just give us some insight around where is this national policy on plastic waste management at the moment, and when can we expect, if you've got insight on that, for it to be actually adopted and put into practice?
Okay, the national policy on plastic life cycle management it is with the ministry, but I will find out. I've not gone through also the documents, me myself, but after this meeting, I will find out about it and how far going to do with the implementation of that document. But I know we have accessed some part of it, the department responsible, and it's one of the things we use in building some of the some of the strategies we want to adopt in the enforcement. So after this meeting, I will find out.
Thank you very much. I will now invite all the speakers, so Corfo and Joshua, to also come back, switch on your videos. And yeah, I will allow a number of more questions to all of the panelists from the audience. So again, yeah, many people still have raised their hands who would like to say something. So maybe let's start with on the top, Aminu Adamu Rijim, director of something. Chibu, if you could please hand the mic and unmute yourself, please, Aminu, and go ahead. Introduce yourself, be straight to the point, and let us know who the question is addressed to. Aminu, are you there? Are you with us? Can you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Then maybe let's move on to another person. Innocent Azim. Would you please unmute yourself, ask your question?
Okay. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks. Please go introduce yourself, ask your question. Thank you.
Good morning, wherever you are. I listened to Joshua's intervention. And obviously the drive appears to be, I'm from Eco Carbon Exchange, Lagos, please. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, Eco Carbon Exchange in Lagos. And we are working in aggregating emissions in the environment across sectors. And as we speak, we already have a project we are implementing, which we call Initiative for Plastic Recovery and Recycling Emission Reduction. And the idea is that by full-blown implementation of that project, you are likely not to find plastic anywhere in the environment, because everybody, from household to the industries, plastics will be a hot cake because it's going to be attracting climate tokens, which ensures that not only that businesses are recycling plastics, are giving, paying prices for those who are collecting, but they're also an inclusive form of paying climate tokens to everybody who's involved in the value chain. And so with that, we can be sure plastics will be out of the environment. I'm not sure the Nezra's boss, the prof's presentation had an allusion to that in any way. But I'm asking Joshua, it's important to say, okay, the policy is ban plastic, and of course you agree that that could slow down some business economies around some enterprises. But I know, for instance, single-use plastic. I know of a company in Lagos in one of the recent webinars who said that single-use plastic is part of what they turn into fuel, okay, for running their machinery. So they go get all the plastics and then turn them as part of the energy in a way that does not even create emissions into the environment. Now, what it means is that beyond those that can go into recycling, those which cannot be turned into recycling process can actually go into powering the boilers in some industries. So if you have this information, will you still be asking for a total ban? And if you have an information regarding what we are bringing to the table, do you think also that is not generating a massive pool for a lot of people to be engaged, to be earning something extra? Meanwhile, we're not going to be having fiscal, a material in the environment, and then it's going to be generated. So is the circular economy will actually be completed without any leakage? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think the point is well taken. Joshua, I'll give you time to respond to it later. Let's take two more questions. let's take Sakinat Bello. Please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and please be straight to the point with your question and address it to a certain speaker, please.
I'm Sakina Bello from Kaduna State. It's good to see, to hear Mr. Aliyu sharing what they have in Israel with regards to the plastic recycling industry. But I just want to remind him that in 2009, the federal government actually had a plan of building multi-purpose recycling plants across 26 zones and 26 cities in Nigeria. Out of these 26 cities, I think 4 out of it was in place, which Kaduna State was part of the beneficiary and other states. But coming back to those recycling plants, I don't think none of it has been working. This is something that's been there since 2009, and up till now, I think the state is still battling to see how we can take ownership of that facility and see how we can call on a public-private partnership to see how these things can move. What I'm just saying is we have quite amazing innovations. We have a lot of things that we want to do as a nation, but then you get to see the implementation is very low. So while we are just bringing up new initiative, we should see how we can go back to the current and the previous ones. Where are the gaps? What are those things that we're not doing right? And see how we can work to see how we can move things forward. Government things have been something that nobody takes so serious, but I think with public, private partnership, things can actually work. So the private guys on the board is not just for us to come and say stories and bring up figures. Let's see how we can all work together and make things work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give space to Nasria to respond to that. Victoria Francis, please enter the mic, Chibu, and then please unmute yourself. Victoria, please unmute yourself and go ahead by introducing yourself and asking your question. Thank you. Victoria, you have to please unmute yourself. Okay, then we're moving on. Deji Akinpelu. Can you please hand him the mic, Chibu, and then please, Deji, unmute yourself, introduce yourself. And
Thank you. My name is Deji Akinpelu, co-founder with Thinking Cities. In our earlier engagement with FIBRA, we had demanded that the organization should make publicly available the amount of plastic waste that they have been able to recollect back from the system. From what we gather from them, the information is available at NESRA, and we strongly believe that this information should be made publicly available. So we're asking NESRA, when are we going to have the data on what the waste collection target is for FIBRA, and also when are they going to share with us the percentage of this target that has been met by members of FIBRA. This is how to make policy work. Let us celebrate the people who are doing well, and let us speak against those who are not doing well. We need this data to be made available. And there's also to be a disbursement plan that should be made publicly available. If FIBRA is working, what is the disbursement plan? In Ghana, there's a disbursement plan for the funds by these PROs. What percentage is going to go to recyclers? What percentage is going to be used to support infrastructure? What percentage is going to go to the informal sector? We need to know all these things. Between FIBRA and NESRA, we need accountability on data. Data needs to be made publicly available. So the DG of FIBRA, NESRA, please let us know when are we going to have data on what has been achieved by your organization and FIBRA. Thank you.
Thanks, Deji. Well noted. So I will take one last question and then give the speakers opportunity to respond. So let's take John Abumchukwu. Please unmute yourself, John, and then go ahead with your question. Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, hi, John.
Okay, good morning to everyone. I thank you for this opportunity and for sharing your expertise on this issue. Well, I am the founder and organizer of Vuma Earth Nigeria. It is a social enterprise, and we do advocate for infrastructural development in our nation. I'm also a member of.
Okay, John, the connection is really horrible. We can't really quite hear you. Can you either move around or try to...
we can do a brand
Okay, John, we can't hear you. Let's move to the next person. I'm really sorry, John, but it doesn't make much sense if we can't hear you. Let's move to next. Benson Dotun Fasanya.
Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Please go ahead.
My name is Benson Dotun Fasanya, and I'm from Center for Earthworks. We are based in Jos. It's a youth-led organization, and we are passionate about securing the earth. So these are my questions. Number one, I would like to know how I can assess the Nigerian Plastic Atlas, the soft copy, somehow, so that we get more knowledge about the publication. Then, I would like to thank the presenters. This question is directed to Mr. Joshua, or Professor Joshua. You mentioned something about the part of the recommendation as the need to convert plastics to energy. And we know, yes, that's one of the most popular options. There are health challenges linked to the burning of plastics. Yesterday was celebrated as the first International Day for Clean Air. And one of the key issues is, of course, the evolution and emergence of new diseases, such as COVID-19. And of course, it's linked to the increase in air pollution. And we know burning of plastic releases most of the toxic chemicals that serve as additives in the production of these plastics. So looking at, weighing at the advantages and disadvantages, yes, of course, they can eliminate the issue of pollution on land and in water, but now people's health is in real jeopardy. Should we ignore the disadvantages and go for the burning of plastic, or should we look the other way? The second question is directed to Kofo. I'm not sure, nothing was mentioned about the role of youth in the issue of addressing the plastic problem in Nigeria. What can the youth do? Are youth included in this Atlas publication? I would like to know also. With respect to, the issue of education, I don't know if awareness creation was really mentioned, but part of our research in February, we were able to engage what we call the local recyclers, and we did a research on microplastics. And part of the things we discover is that the local recyclers actually increasing the amount of microplastics we found in our environment unknowingly. What's the role of education in addressing this? And then to the last question directed to Professor from Nextria.
Wrap up, yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it's on the issue of data and the need to engage civil society in solving the Nigerian plastic problem. And of course, implementing the policies. How can they be fully integrated into this? Those are my questions and observations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'll hand back the mic to our three speakers. Let's start with Nasria. Prof. Uro, there were specific questions addressed to you and Nasria. Those, just to summarize them very briefly, there was a point raised around recycling plants that have been part of a policy program, and yes, one of the participants observed that those recycling plants are not up and running, and why we invent more policy while implementing the ones that we actually have. So if you could enlighten us a little bit on that point of the recycling plants and what this is at. And then there was also the very pertinent point around access to the specific question was, can we get data on waste collection targets by in the beverage industry? And what percentage has been met and what hasn't, just in, to allow for more transparency and accountability. If you could just respond to those 2 points, and then maybe lastly, what just was mentioned, the role of youth in your initiatives. Those 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. The issue of recycling and what the government is doing, there was a plan, as mentioned by one of the speakers, to establish a recycling plant in 26 states. That was as far back as 2009. So I know that the government has established some pilot recycling plants. Even recently, there was a plant that was commissioned by the Honorable Minister of Environment in Nasarawa State. So what the government can do is just to commission some of these ones, and the private sector are always encouraged to key in, and there's a provision for facilities, especially the green bond, for most of them to key in order to establish some of these facilities, so that it will generate a lot of employment, green jobs, and a lot of income. Another speaker asked regarding the amount of plastic collected and the target set for the FIBRA. So the FIBRA always send in their report quarterly to Nasria on the amount of plastic collected, and there are targets that are set. So I think whoever is interested, we are going to release such data. And he asked regarding percentage of targets made by members of FIBRA. I don't know what he meant by members of FIBRA, because the members are many, most of the food and beverages industries, especially the giant companies, form this FIBRA. So they don't have a specific target, because everything is lumped together, the collection and everything. So the FIBRA is the PRO that is managing the collection and the recycling on behalf of all those that have keyed. And also the disbursement plan, certainly there's an issue of disbursement plan, but what I want people to know is most of these things are at the initial formation stage. So we are sensitizing people to get them key into this PROs. Some of these are reluctant to key in. So that's why we are doing sensitization, and we are coming up with policies that will force them at the end of the day to join. And recently, we even waived some of the fees. We reduced the registration fee for some of these collectors and recyclers. We even suspend the payment of annual fees in order to get people to join. So, and another person asks whether we have the capacity to ensure nationwide implementation of the EPR. Well, for the meantime, we are just starting, and you know, it's not an easy task for one agency to cover all the nation. We're an enforcement agency, so we partner with the industries. That's why we encourage the formation of the PROs for various sectors. In this case, we are talking about plastic, the FIBRA. So we also have other waste streams like the e-waste. They have also formed their EPR. We have the waste battery sector. They also formed their EPR. We also collaborate with international partners. So we are always open to collaboration in order to see that we succeed. And somebody asked about availability of data and the need to engage CSOs and also policy integration. We always engage the general public and CSOs in most of our activities. We used to have the stakeholders forum. We always invite people all over the country in order to come and share their experience and get their input, and we'll continue to do so. And somebody asks, why are most of these industries not willing to key into the EPR? What I can say is attitudinal. People have that attitude of not wanting to join at times, but not all. So that's why we have all measures on ground to ensure that at the end of the day, people key into it one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much for your responses. And I hope you will not mind if we kind of put you in touch with the people requesting some information so that you can have further exchanges around that. But for now, let me move on to Kofu. Kofu, there was a specific question to you around what role for the youth, but you're also free to respond to any of the other points that were raised. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I mean, of course, you know, for young people who form such a large part of our population, it's very, very important for them to be educated about the issue of plastic waste and how we need to manage it. And of course, they have to be part of public sensitization programs, both maybe in school and also with the ones that NESRA is putting forward. I mean, to respond to a lot of the conversation that's been going on, I would like to see a greater sense of urgency and realism about what is actually going on. Because yes, of course, there's always going to be a lot of plastics around so that people can start recycling and doing all these things. That is obviously going to happen. If there's a ban on single-use plastics, that is not going to make all the plastic disappear. There's still going to be plenty of plastic around for people to recycle. But you see, the thing is, what we have looked at since, I mean, the EPR program started in 2014. And I'm sure that since then, there must have been some kind of evaluation of how far they've gone. I don't know whether that evaluation of the past 6 years is available for us to see. But, you know, the reality is that there is just so much waste, and the capacity of NESRA to actually deal with all of it is very difficult. I mean, in terms of the kind of budget that is required to go all around the country. And so I just think that, you know, when I mean, we don't even have sort of evidence about the targets that are being set, you know, the sort of the kind of data that's been released. I mean, when we look at the national, I mean, I think Prof. Oladipo said that in Nigeria, it's not a problem of bringing out policies. It's a problem of the implementation and the enforcement. So that is what we really have to concentrate on. And we have to ask how, because with this new national policy of solid waste management, NESRA has been given a huge role to play here. And I just wonder whether, you know, the budget to do it is actually there. And also there's the timeline. I mean, there's no point in having these policies unless you have a timeline of what you actually want to achieve. And it's no point saying, oh, yes, we're getting there. We really have to say, okay, this is what we want to achieve in between this period. And so I just feel that I don't get that sense of urgency about the problem, because where we are, this is 2020, what do we want to see in the next 2-3 years? I just really feel that there has to be much more transparency in that area, because the volume of waste produced just outweighs the capacity to manage the problem in the way that is being spoken about now. And so we have to start concentrating on looking at banning certain types of single-use plastics. other countries that have far bigger capacity to deal with waste than Nigeria have had to take that route.
Thank you. Thank you for those passionate closing remarks, and thank you for underlining the urgency of the issue that probably can't be highlighted enough. Joshua, I will give you the last word for this discussion here today. Several points that have been raised for you. One of them, why don't we just burn all the plastic and create energy with it? Is that a good idea? What's your take? And any other you'd like to add to that?
Thank you. So the first question, talking about seeing if we have recycling projects around, why do we need to ban single-use plastics again? Well, there is no how we can recycle our life into the future. That's one fact. Again, looking at, there is no amount of recycling that can take off all plastics from the environment, and Nigerian environment in particular. Now, plastics is, maybe we don't understand the dimensions to plastics. I just want to help you to categorize it, use two categories. Using the international trade categorization, you have about 26 categories of plastics. Then using the industries categorization, you have about 7 categories. Each of these categories is linked to not less than about 10 different products. Now, I want to ask, you are just going by the road, especially with Nigerian, maybe attitude, just get snacks, and then maybe the bread, you get a nylon, where do you throw it? You put it in your pocket, waiting for a time to be recycled, or you just take a sweets, and then you take off the nylon, the plastic wrap, then you put it in your, maybe your pocket, waiting for the time to be recycled. No, we have gone so far, the plastic has gone into our system. Not only that, the waste management attitude, one, we don't have separation at source. So long as there is no separation at source, there is no amount of recycling project that we take off all plastic from environment. Larger percentage will still go to the dump sites. Larger percentage will still go to the streets. Even if I will ask the person that asked the question, when you take bread after the black, what we call nylon, when you remove. So how many of us, including myself speaking, that we just keep the nylon waiting for a recycler to come and pick? After taking you take a single bottle of water, and after taking that water, you put it in your bag, waiting for a time when a recycler will come and pick. One way or the other, you throw it into the trash, into the dustbin. Then where does it end? So there is no amount of recycling that takes off all the plastic from the environment. For some specific categories of plastic, yes, recycling will take care. But for many categories, single-use plastics, with the attitude we have in Africa and in Nigeria, no separation of sorting from the source, plastic will still litter the environment and the problem will be there with us. So when we go for recycling, there should be a policy also one way addressing single-use plastics. Now, concerning the energy, when we talk of converting the plastic waste into energy, it doesn't mean that all categories of plastic, we just set fire and we burn. No, that's not what we mean. That is what we call refuse-derived fuel. The plastic waste undergoes some chemical changes that give us appropriate fuel that may be applicable in other instances. And in that case, just like we use our the petrol, the kerosene, and all the others, it will fall into those categories. Not just setting plastic on fire, using it to cook, or using it to burn, or using it to heat this. There is refuse-derived fuel that on the refuse or the plastics undergo some chemical changes that give us some desired type of fuel. So in a way, we have recovered the energy from the waste. That's a simple response to the questions. I don't know whether the questioners are satisfied.
Well, we won't find out now, but yeah, it's time to wrap up. Thank you very much to everyone for contributing today to this discussion. And I think, yeah, this will hopefully not be the last discussion we have had on this topic, but maybe the start of a longer term conversation around these issues, as they need to be looked at with more urgency, I believe, as Kofu has pointed out. Also, just to kind of like give a bit of a bigger picture again. I mean, even if you look at countries like Germany, the recycling rate is around about 10% or so. So there is no way that in the situation Nigeria is, or any other country around the world, all the plastic waste created can be somehow recycled. It's just, impossible. The bigger picture is also that, and I would like us to keep that also in mind, that the plastic producing industry has an interest to produce more, especially now that the oil prices are falling. So petrochemicals seem to be the latest bet of oil companies, meaning they want to produce more plastics and they need a market for it. There has been a report recently in the New York Times saying that they are currently trying to get the Kenyan government to water down some of their regulations, just so that American petrochemical companies can create a larger market for themselves in Kenya. So that's the bigger picture we're also talking about. The plastic industry is a fossil fuel-based industry. And at the end of the day, it's an industry that is not in line with the climate targets also we have set ourselves as the global community. So much on that. Again, thank you very much to Nesria for agreeing to contributing here today. We very much appreciate your time. I'm sure you've got a very busy schedule. Thank you for being here, Joshua and Kofu as well. Thank you for contributing to the Atlas. Much appreciated. For everyone out there who hasn't downloaded the Plastic Atlas yet, please do so. You can find it on our webpage. It's www.ng.boell.org. You'll find it there, as well as like a dossier with the individual articles. And I hope we'll be in touch with you who have been on this call today again to continue and further the conversation. Thank you very much. Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.